Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the And Also podcast. I'm your host, Madison. Thank you so much for tuning in, whether it's on YouTube for the video version or Spotify or Apple Podcasts for the audio version. So today's episode is a very special one. I have a guest coming on that I've been really looking forward to, and I'm super excited to share today's story with you guys. So my guest, Laurie, is actually Regis's mom. And if you don't know who Regis is my ex-partner who I dated for 6 years. He actually took his life about a little over a year ago now. And so he struggled with schizophrenia and obviously suicide. And so today's topic is going to be a heavy one, but it's something that I feel is super important to talk about, especially in a society that definitely stigmatizes psychotic mental disorders and just mental health in general. I felt like this conversation was a super important educational topic that I really want to nurture and care for every step of this conversation. So if this is going to be triggering for you, please refrain from watching this. But I do think that there's a lot of really incredible pieces of information that anyone can kind of take away. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and let's get into our drink of the day before we get into the episode. So today's drink of the day is peach Snapple, of all things. So originally we were going to do like a hibiscus tea, but then I was like, wait, why don't we do one of Regis's favorite drinks? And his nickname was Peaches, and he loved peach Snapple, and we would always get takeout and have Snapple. So I think I'm actually going to get General Tso's tofu takeout tonight and drink my peach Snapple just because it's such a great, beautiful memory. It's so sweet and so yummy. In honor of Regis, get yourself a peach Snapple. And if you're on YouTube watching this, definitely leave in the comments below what you are drinking during today's episode. And before we get into the interview today, I wanted to talk about my book of the week. And I actually have 2 this week. Each book kind of stands for something different and shares a different experience about today's topic. So the first book is called The Mike File, and this is by Trimble. It's a story of grief and hope about Stephen's older brother, Mike, who dealt with schizophrenia, psychosis, and he just kind of had to put together Mike's life story after many years of not truly knowing the full extent of what happened and didn't want his brother to be forgotten. And this is a just beautiful story about Mike's life and death and just dealing with schizophrenia as a family, really. And I think if you really want an introduction to like a memoir about schizophrenia and understanding more complex mental illnesses that include psychosis, paranoia, and hallucinations, this is a really great place to start. It's a very short book. It's 144 pages. So I think this is a really great book to kind of jump into if you're interested in learning about this topic through the lens of a true, real experience. When I read this book, I felt seen for like the first time ever. The second book I wanted to share is Malady of the Mind, Schizophrenia and the Path to Prevention by Jeffrey A. Lieberman. And this is more of a comprehensive deep dive into the actual illness of schizophrenia and what that looks like in terms of history, treatments, its manifestations, how it presents itself, and just some anecdotal stories as well. So there's like diagnostics and the process of diagnosing, the buildup, searching for schizophrenia. So really learning about the illness in a psychological study sort of way. But this is also very readable. It's not filled with medical jargon. So I would really recommend this if you just want to be educated on the topic. I think you'll find throughout this episode that one of the most important messages we wanted to get across to our viewers is that education on mental illnesses outside of depression and anxiety is a life-saving measure. And so if it's something you're interested in learning more about, this book is a great place to start. So with all that being said, I know today's episode is going to be a heavy one. I know it's going to be a difficult conversation, but I think it's one of the most important conversations I could possibly share with you guys after everything that Laurie and I have experienced, I just want you all to know that there is room to share your story. There are some really hard things that people go through. Empathy is super important, and you'll see that a lot in this episode. So without further ado, let's get into today's interview. Welcome to today's episode. I have a very, very, very special guest, and we have known each other for a very, very long time. So this is Laurie. So would you like to introduce yourself and just kind of talk about why you're here today?
I'm Laurie, and thank you for inviting me, Madison.
Of course.
I'm so thrilled. Congratulations on your new format. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
Madison asked me to talk today about my experience with young adult schizophrenia and pretty heavy topics.
Yeah.
And suicide. I'm grateful to be able to talk about those things.
Me too. It's really amazing to have a space where we can share, you know, what we've been through and try to help somebody who may be experiencing something similar in their lives.
Absolutely.
Because I think that's really what we needed when we were going through it.
Yes.
To just know that there was support or there was somebody out there who, you know, had been through something similar.
That we weren't alone.
Yeah, 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%.
And it is kind of a lonely, isolating experience to lose a partner, to lose a friend, to lose a child. I found after losing Regis, there's a whole bunch of people who came forward that I had no idea.
I know.
It's
with stories.
A quiet pain. It's held close. It hurts so bad.
Yeah.
And it's not talked about.
It's so swept under the rug.
Yes.
It's also not very well, like schizophrenia as a whole is not well understood by the general population. No. I even realized I had my own biases about it and my own what you see about it is mostly what you see in movies, and it like demonizes people that struggle with mental illness or even the criminal justice system. We see like bad things happen because this person was schizophrenic or had some sort of like what's classified as a psychotic disorder.
Yeah.
And instead of helping these people, we criminalize them and we don't support them in getting help. And so that just perpetuates the issue of the demonization and the stigmatizing of these people who are literally just people.
Yes.
Who are dealing with something.
Yes.
And they just need help.
Schizophrenia is such a fringe mental illness.
Yeah.
It's such a keep it away, keep it back, don't want to, talk about it. And I found that even in the mental health community, nurses and practitioners, they don't want to have a schizophrenic patient. They reach a point in their career where they're, able to choose their their area of expertise. And even as psychologists and psychiatrists, they can absolutely choose not to treat schizophrenic patients. And it's sad because what are we told when we have a crisis, when we have a mental health problem?
Go ask for help.
Go ask for help.
Reach out.
Go ask for help.
But that only is when, if you're depressed or have anxiety.
Exactly.
No one's talking about the other disorders.
There's mainstream okay to be mental illnesses.
It's almost like, it's cute and quirky to have depression and anxiety.
Lately.
But at the end of the day, there's more mental illness out there than depression and anxiety.
Thank you.
And there's still people, like even mental health advocates, don't understand these things. And I consider myself a mental health advocate. And I didn't even understand these things until I went through it. And so really what we want to do today is have a conversation that helps everybody understand it. So if you are in this scenario where you encounter somebody or one of your loved ones or friends or family members is dealing with this mental illness, at least you have some sort of knowledge in the back of your mind.
Yes.
Where you could say, I watched that episode.
Let
me refer to that.
Some sense of what it is.
Yeah, because
even acknowledging that it exists.
Yes.
I know I never thought of schizophrenia. I knew of it again. It's the serial killers. It's the
what you see in
the
the
psychotics,
media.
the beautiful mind, sort of area as day to day, people just making a living on their own journeys. Why would we think about schizophrenia?
Right.
And so when it hit home so hard and cruelly, it's something we should just know, just have a little bit of knowledge about, because more and more people are going through this.
One of the things that we didn't know until we were living it was it usually comes out between the ages of 18 and 25.
Correct.
And that's exactly the timeline that it hit.
Regis was almost textbook young adult schizophrenia.
Yes.
And yet it still wasn't acknowledged. It still wasn't recognized. It still wasn't, come let us help you because we're aware of what to do now from the mental health, system.
Yeah.
Regis is my youngest child. He would get into trouble at school. He had his own way of doing things. He was like a little rebel, but he was so intelligent, so smart, so creative. As years went on and he grew up, he had a penchant for being an artist, being a welder, self-educating himself.
Anything creative. It's like he picked it up and he was an expert.
Yes.
It took no practice.
Right.
He's like, oh, I'm going to redo the kitchen floors in my house.
Yeah.
Redid the kitchen floors. It looked like a professional that had been working in the field for 30 years
Yes.
did it.
Yes.
Like overnight. It was the most unreal thing I've ever seen.
Yes. Highly talented, highly intelligent, almost genius level.
I would say genius level.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
Yes.
Without a doubt.
And, what a kid, what a young man. Signs started showing up in his late adolescence that something was amiss, something was off. It was too bad, and I had no idea what was ahead. I had no idea that my son had schizophrenia and all that would entail. And it was just a heartbreaking journey. And I feel so sorry that Regis had to go through that.
We can sit here and say it was like traumatizing, but to think about what he was going through is like a whole other ballgame. Once again, it always circles back to like, if only we knew more.
Yeah.
Because even just the way you conversate with someone who has schizophrenia.
He wasn't able to do that.
No. And it's a very hard thing when that person has a very solid sense of what their reality is. And obviously on the outside, we know it's not real.
It's not real.
But for them,
absolutely,
it is 100% real.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can say to change their mind.
It would be like, Madison, if I was to come in here and see you in here and you had blocks and you had your hair in ponytails and you said you were doing a podcast, how heartbreaking would that be for me and you to tell you that's not real?
Right.
You're not having a podcast, Madison. I'm so
Right.
sorry. Young adults, you're coming into your identity. The future's ahead of you. You're self-possessed in a good way. And to have someone come in and tell you it's wrong and not real, it's just a terrible thing.
It's extremely difficult to navigate because as much as you want to be supportive and like find a way to, like with Regis, I had a huge struggle of like, I want to believe you. I want to believe what you're telling me. I know it's not real, but I know it's real to you. And what do I say?
Yes.
Because on one hand, if I agree with you, let's just say these people are after him, right?
Yes.
If I agree, in a way, I'm almost enabling the delusion.
Right.
And I'm allowing it to become bigger and scarier for him. Because if someone else sees it, it must be real.
Right.
But it's not.
Right.
But if I tell him it's not real, then he thinks that I'm working with these people who are after him.
And it's jarring because your loved one is not believing you.
Yeah.
Not listening to you when we are, but their perspective is not that.
Right.
And, how upsetting would that be? And then you're made to feel, okay, I'm alone in this.
And
because
then you
no one else
isolate.
no one else can see this. Oh, I keep saying it's heartbreaking.
That's really the best word for it.
It is.
Because it truly is when you love someone so much and you would do anything to help them, but there is nothing.
Right.
There's nothing you can do.
Right.
And then mental health professionals don't take it seriously. Or that's actually something I would love for you to talk about is how, even just getting an appointment and upholding an appointment for someone who's in that headspace, it's a recipe for disaster. So I would love for you to talk on your experience with that.
Hundreds of years ago, when a husband was tired of having a wife, he was able to up and have her institutionalized. Later on, through advocacy and awareness, there were guidelines and laws put in place that we're in charge of our own mental illness. We have rights, and somebody can't come in and just put us away.
Yeah.
And so with those things in place, with Regis becoming a young adult, not a minor, I wasn't able to advocate for him. The mental health facility would not allow me to advocate. And then I was upset because as mental health care workers, they should know that a person with schizophrenia shouldn't be expected to be making and keeping appointments.
And at the same time,
holding them accountable for missing.
They don't even know that they're mentally ill most of the time.
That's a huge part, too. Getting Regis to a clinic, and he'd, jump out of the car and run away. And because he wasn't crazy, Mom.
Which is sad because even the person living that mental illness has these internalized stigmas in their head.
Oh, yeah.
Things that they've seen about schizophrenia.
Yes.
Well, that's not me. I'm not out here, committing these crimes and killing people. And, I'm not a serial killer. I'm not schizophrenic. So not only does it, impact everybody in terms of our view on it, but the people who are suffering with it now are in denial because it doesn't match this made-up false criteria that's been painted.
Right. Regis struggled, and he would say, there's stigmatization. I don't want to, be associated with that, fall into that category.
Yeah.
That's not me. So it turned seeking help for his problems associated with schizophrenia into a battle, essentially, because he didn't see himself as crazy. And again, to have loved ones, encouraging him to seek help when he himself felt he wasn't crazy, it was hard.
And then it also puts a wedge between you and him.
Yes.
Because he thinks you're trying to, put this label on him or, tell him that he's something that he's not when all you're trying to do is just help.
And then we're at a loss how to help. A lot of people say, they bring it on themselves. They know what they're doing, attention seeking, med seeking. They just want it boxed up and put away. Even when you're asking family for help, friends for help, when you're reaching out, I don't know what to do. Regis is hurting. Something's going on. And the only advice we ever get is to seek help.
Think about if you don't have health insurance. Think about if you don't have the resources. There's so many deep systemic issues with the healthcare system in general.
Yes.
But specifically mental health, because it's not like you can just, shine a light in somebody's eyes and, tap their reflexes 3 times and take their blood and then figure out that they have schizophrenia.
And then especially if you have a non-compliant young man who's very headstrong, independent.
That's not me. That's not me. Yeah.
Yes. There's just so many layers to it. There were times when police had to be called. Crisis mobiles would need to come in. They would go talk to Regis, and he was fine.
It's unreal.
He was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, are you kidding me?
Literally 10 minutes ago, you were not fine.
You were not fine.
You were scary.
Yes. He's fine. Give him back his bat. Give him back his knife.
Yeah.
And go on their merry way. When, again, it's like, you guys should know what's involved with a schizophrenic person? Why is it so easy for you to just walk away from this wreckage?
Right. But those people get to like walk away and go home at night
Right.
and not think about it.
And that's the thing. You got to remember, a lot of these healthcare workers, they're on the clock.
Right.
They got, lunchtime, if they get it, because, yes, they are short-staffed. They clock out at the end of the day.
Right.
And if they're fortunate enough, they don't get to, they don't bring all these things home with them. It's a lot. But then also, these guys with schizophrenia, they don't get to clock out.
Right.
They don't get to go home. A lot of advice that I received during the time I was trying to help Regis, I had called a crisis team again, and they weren't going to send him out because they had already been out for Regis a few times. So they did have a counselor talk on the phone to me, and she said her child had schizophrenia, her son. And she found that what worked for them is calling the cops every time there was an episode and keeping a record, having a paper trail going. And in her experience, that worked for them. And eventually he was put in a 72-hour hold, and he was able to access meds and support. He's functioning and doing well. And I was so encouraged, and I was so grateful to have a mother share her story with me. That experience wasn't mine, and that advice did not work for me.
It shouldn't take, 20 episodes to be taken seriously.
Right. Because all this time is going by, and it is a deteriorating illness.
And also people
if
are
it's not managed, if it's not medicated, if there's not support.
Yes.
And the person themselves wanting to handle it and, have self-care and deal with it and own it. I was really upset by that because the more you have them arrested, just because they're mentally ill doesn't mean they don't get traumatized each and every time.
Yes, and the cops are scary, and we should not be criminalizing the mentally ill.
Correct.
They didn't do anything criminal.
And that's, yes.
They're just sick.
They're just sick. And the jails have become kind of the default of the mentally ill. I worked for a short time in a jail. I'm a nurse. I'm an LPN. I just saw the mentally ill thrown in with rapists, people have murdered, and they were lumped in there and treated as a criminal. And they're not a criminal. They're very ill.
They just need help.
And could you imagine having, hallucinations, delusions, paranoia, and you're stuck in a cage?
Yeah. With people who
are going to laugh at you, make fun of you, take advantage of you.
Yep.
Because a lot of times those with schizophrenia, they want human contact. They want to reach out. They want to converse.
Yeah.
They want to have community. But they've lost touch, and they've lost that ability after a while to have it in a normal sense.
Right. Yeah, I mean, like, towards the beginning, Regis and I, we could have a normal conversation, and there would be, like, little windows of, like,
Yeah.
But as time went on, there was no normalcy to what we could talk about.
And there was no sense to what he would say.
Yeah, it was like almost code. You'd have to like decipher it. He would write things down.
Yes.
He would send like strings of numbers or just things that didn't.
Yes. I remember when he would come to visit me, he would throw away my phone. He would have me come out to the lawn, the front lawn.
Yeah.
And he would throw my phone away, and he would write on a piece of paper and show me the note. And then rip it up. And then he would burn the ripped up pieces. He was so paranoid that people were hearing him, seeing him, knew his thoughts.
Plotting against him.
Against him. He believed every song on the radio. He loved music.
Oh my God. Yeah,
loved music. And it was really sad that one of his favorite artists OD'd and died right before you guys were able to see his concert.
Yeah.
He loved that artist. And so that was very sad. But but he loved his music. It got to the point where he couldn't listen anymore because
Yep.
each song was being sung to him.
Yeah, it was as if it was like a code
Yes.
from someone who was stalking him.
Yes.
That they were, playing this song in a way that was like targeted
Right.
at him.
And so it got to a point where he couldn't enjoy his music
His favorite
anymore.
thing.
Yeah, his favorite thing.
He loved Mac Miller.
Yeah.
I mean, when I think of Mac
Loved
Miller, I
Mac
can't
Miller.
not associate it with Regis.
Yes. He adored Mac Miller.
Yeah. I want to talk about destigmatizing common myths, common misconceptions, anything that you kind of want to dispel here and just talk about like maybe what you thought before and what you learned and just kind of like the whole societal stance.
A thought that comes to mind is Regis would get destructive.
Yeah.
After a while, when he was in the throes, he would get destructive. And that brought a lot of anger, especially from those whose stuff he was destroying.
Right.
Now, me as his mother, I knew he was acting out and in pain.
Right.
And the things that he was destroying were, it's kind of poetic in a sense. They symbolize something to him.
Yeah. 1,000,000%.
You know, destroying an old toy that was kept, destroying doors and walls. In a sense, it was kind of poetic, but it had to stop there because he was destroying things.
Right.
And even though I understood why, he still needed to be held responsible for the things he was doing. If they're teetering into the area of causing harm, hurting, treating, an animal wrong, we just didn't do that. Treating people badly, destroying things, acting out in a way that's hurting people.
Yeah.
They still need to be held responsible. And that's kind of tricky.
It's very hard.
That's kind of tricky. A myth is that a lot of times that they know what they're doing and they're doing it on purpose.
Right. Well, I do think a lot of times people don't understand that it's a mental illness where you don't necessarily have full control over your brain and your decisions, and you are so tormented by these delusions and hallucinations and this almost storyline that you've kind of created in your head that a lot of your actions...
Or has been created in your head.
Yeah, yeah.
And
a lot of your actions are not intentionally to be harmful, but they're almost in self-defense.
Yes.
Against what's going on in your head. And that's a really hard thing for people to understand because they just think, oh, throw them in jail, punish them. They know what they're doing. They're just being manipulative to try to, get what they want in life. And it's like if
who would desire to have that path?
Yeah. And there's a huge difference between somebody with schizophrenia who's out of control of their actions and let's say someone who's a sociopath who's in control of their actions that are negatively impacting other people.
Oh, yeah.
Because the intention behind the schizophrenic destruction is not necessarily to harm people, but it's almost in like self-defense.
Yes. Like who knows what's going on in that mind? What a cruel world.
Yeah.
Inside their mind.
I think the loneliness piece is something, after like just in the wake of all of this, I've really struggled with sitting with that in many ways because the loneliness that he dealt with is like, even if he was with people, there's still this other world that he's very much trapped in.
Yes.
So like it's really a loneliness that you can never escape. And in some ways he functioned better when he was alone.
Yes.
Because when he was around other people, then you have people trying to tell him like, you're fine, nothing's wrong.
Yeah, that's
blah, blah,
not,
blah.
That's not what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have that social awkwardness, the expectations to, cut it out,
Right.
Be normal. Something that impacted him, negatively was isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And then schizophrenic people also experience abuse,
Yeah.
trauma, neglect, and that compounds the illness
Yeah.
and the damage of the illness.
Were there things you noticed in, early childhood that could have signaled that something was ahead? What about teenage years? Or, what things, even outside of personal experience, would you recommend people look for?
That's really hard because each child has their own personality and their own, place in the family, and then their own experiences going on at school and with friends. To me, it did feel almost sudden, almost like sudden onset.
Yeah.
He was functioning fine, doing well that I was aware of, just being a elementary school kid, middle school kid, high school kid. But he did experience some depression. There were things I found out later that he was suffering with that I wasn't aware of.
Right.
That he dealt with alone.
Right.
Or that you were aware of.
Yeah.
Which was suicidal ideation. And I just feel terrible that I wasn't tuned in enough to be aware of more of what he was struggling with.
Right.
The things that I started seeing were just conversations would be kind of off. I wouldn't really understand what he was saying. And then he would mutter, and it would seem like he was in a bad mood, and I'd wonder why he was so angry. Sometimes he would get so angry.
Yeah, or tense.
And frustrated.
Yeah.
Or he'd be tense and uncomfortable with things that he usually liked, going out, doing things. And he was, avoidant and not wanting to do stuff. And I thought maybe he was going through a phase.
Right.
And, maybe he's, figuring things out. And what young adult really wants to hang out with their family and hang out, and do these things they did as a kid or whatever.
Yeah, like in some ways the early stages of it almost felt like normal behavior, but that was just slightly different.
Right.
It's like, oh, this could just be like a passing moment, or maybe he just has extra stress on his plate. But he always maintained a job and maintained a life schedule. Everything on the outside seemed very normal. It's like, he's working.
And even exceptional.
Yeah.
I mean, his work ethic was wonderful. And he had a really good job.
Yeah.
And then he dressed really well and bought, nice quality things. And
like he presented on the outside as if everything was better than it.
Yeah, he was moving along.
Been.
He was getting out in the world. He was doing well. I was so...
Yeah.
And again, as parents and friends and family, do we kind of take that for granted? That if people are doing well and successful, that they're fine?
Right.
That we don't have to think they're not okay?
Right.
That we don't have to check in? Suicidal tendencies are kind of held personal and close.
Yes.
And you could tell when someone's acting reckless or unsafe or isn't thinking highly of themselves or respecting themselves. But deep down, a lot of people keep that ideation inside. Because again, I hate to say normal society, but, the common everyday person, how you doing? And what are you going to say? I really want to die.
Yeah.
No, it's
like,
not acceptable.
How are you?
Inappropriate.
Yeah.
And yet, inside, people are sometimes maybe dying to be able to say that, but yet it's not met with anything positive.
It's like almost people maybe would laugh it off if you said that. It's almost strange because at the same time we're living in a society where we're told
to talk about it.
Yeah, reach out for help.
Reach out.
Ask for help. Talk about it. Bring it up, and then you bring it up, and there's no help.
Mm-mm.
It's hard to get help, especially if you're in that bad of a place.
Yeah.
And the general response is just to laugh it off or to be like, "Oh, you're so dramatic,"
Right.
There's no real substance to
Yeah, it puts a
saying
lot of
something like that.
responsibility kind of on us to be like, when we ask how you doing, are we able to handle, because we got to reach out too to our loved ones.
Right.
But are we equipped? Are we able to handle what's going to come out?
Right.
It's kind of a hesitancy on our part and a hesitancy on their part. And then sometimes things just never even get resolved.
Even in my high school health class, for example, or my college health class, we talked about depression, anxiety for one day, then we moved on.
Right.
It's like if we were teaching more empathy, more understanding, more facts about a wide range of mental illnesses, there would be a lot more room for those actual conversations of answering, how are you, honestly.
Right. So-and-so has diabetes, and that's okay.
Right.
Oh, so-and-so, is having a hard time with their lung cancer, and that's okay. Somebody just found out that they have MS. They were just diagnosed with MS, and that's okay. The Smiths just found out that their son does have schizophrenia, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Why can't we have these things? Okay, they're hard, they're unfortunate, they're things that those people have to grapple with, spiritually, physically, mentally. But when do we come to the point when we're like, but it's okay?
Right. And we're going to support you and be here for you,
Right.
just as if you got a cancer diagnosis.
Right.
Because in so many ways, it's just a part of your body that's sick.
Right.
Just like if you have lung cancer, your lung is sick.
Right.
If you have schizophrenia, your brain
is sick.
And unfortunately, there is no cure for it.
No, it's
you
management.
can't just go in and get chemo or, take a medication or go to physical therapy.
Yeah.
But there are ways to manage it and to live.
It's all
with
in
it.
management.
Yeah. And the more we run away from the reality of it, the less help that's going to be out there and the higher the numbers are going to get.
What's absolutely tragic is that in schizophrenia, a lot of schizophrenics don't make it out alive.
Especially men with schizophrenia. There's a very high suicide percentage.
Yes.
Because there is the stigma of men, getting mental health support. Not that it's like anyone really gets enough, especially when they have schizophrenia, but
there's something about men.
Men are less likely to get
They're
help.
able to handle it.
Right. They're expected to.
They're men.
They're expected to just move
they're
on.
They're made different, built different, and can handle these mental stressors better, I guess. Whereas women are stigmatized too.
Yeah.
That they're more frail and nervous and
there's
not
stigma
able to handle
both ways.
Yeah, both ways that are just untrue.
Yeah.
There's so many other factors that decide those things.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, if you have an illness, you deserve to get help. It shouldn't matter what your gender is. Yeah, there is such a high suicide rate. There's a massive percentage of people who with schizophrenia can't get help and wind up being homeless.
Yes.
There's a massive percentage of people who are schizophrenic and struggle with drug abuse. There's a massive percentage of people with schizophrenia who wind up getting treatment and not taking their medication.
Yes.
And there's no long-term support.
Yes.
And they go through cycles of, living on the streets, living with a parent, going back into a care system.
If they're lucky.
Yeah, if they're lucky.
Yeah.
And so there's so many realities that exist. All of them should be equally acknowledged and not criminalized and taken seriously. And we need to look at this issue as a whole for what it truly is.
Right.
And step up and help people.
Yes. It all boils down to treat them like a person.
Right.
They're a person just like us. They're struggling and hurting.
Yep.
They have a condition where their brain is, not functioning correctly.
Right.
It's firing all wrong. But they're still a person.
Right.
And it all boils down to empathy.
Yes.
Which people just can't afford anymore. It's not a priority anymore, which is too bad.
Right.
And being kind, which has become a sign of weakness anymore. People don't prescribe to that so much either.
Right.
Look at them as a person. Treat them how you would want to be treated.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying get taken advantage of.
Right.
I'm not saying put yourself in harm's way or be a punching bag. I'm not saying, give your all to the expense of
Your well-being.
your well-being.
Yeah.
There's definitely, especially even more of importance that you prioritize yourself if you're going to care for someone else.
Right.
Caregivers have learned this. They know this. Treat them like they're humans, like they're people.
Right.
They had dreams, they had goals, they have feelings.
They have family, they have friends who love them and care for them. No one has the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes. And it's like, imagine if that were you and the whole world just basically spit in your face and turned their backs on you. How would you feel?
Empathy.
But people struggle with that.
It's easier to just be like, no, I'm not going to look at it. Just get it out of here.
Yeah.
It's broken, throw it away.
Yeah, it's the elephant in every room.
And that's why it was so hard when I was begging and pleading, for people to help me.
Right.
For one reason or the other, which I can't, blame them for. A lot of people had to step away from Regis. It had come to the point where it wasn't safe, or it was just ridiculous, to try to have a relationship with him. Right. Friends that needed to just be like, hey, man, I can't do this anymore. And if friends don't know how to help or what to say, or they start being maybe targets of that kind of behavior.
Which is so hard when you love someone.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's so hard, especially when you know where they're at.
Yeah.
And you also know that there's nothing you can do to help.
And you kind of, at one point, viscerally know how it's going to go.
Right. If you could go back to yourself during that time and tell yourself a piece of advice, what would you say?
Piece of advice I would tell myself, I feel there was so much more I could have done. And that I was kind of involved in my own stuff too. Even though I felt I gave my all for helping Regis, did I really? And I don't mean I feel guilty and bad and it was my fault. I know myself. I should have got myself out of the situation I was in, get myself together, and been the best Laurie I could have been so I could help my child. Yeah, I would tell myself, get it together, man.
Right.
Your child needs you. And even though it was just a chaotic, crazy ride, such a heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, mess, he was much more alone, much more unsupported than he deserved. How dare I not have been more present and more active. And that's what I would tell any mother going through it. Not as a lecture, not as a threat.
Right.
But this is a battle. This is a battle for their life.
Right.
Literally for their life. How much importance are you going to put on that? How much priority are you going to put on that? How much of yourself are you going to put towards that? And a lot of parents can't do it. A lot of fathers actually. But that's just a percentage.
Yeah.
But a lot of fathers actually choose to not deal with it. It is hard being a united front, I'm sure. Parents, who are together dealing with this and then eventually not. I'm sure the mother is seen as way too maternal, and the father's probably trying to get, some sense of it all, some control of it all. Never the two shall meet. And
right.
what a difficult dynamic that is. It affects the family and, the parents and
right.
and the sisters and brothers. I have 4 children. While I was, helping Regis and, trying to advocate for Regis, and my whole life was Regis and all the craziness with Regis, my other children, I'm sure, felt like they fell by the wayside. They were still having important events of their lives, They were getting married. They were having babies. They were, having, homes bought and built. They were, becoming accomplished, musicians and making albums. But the center and the focus of their mom and of them was Regis. That's so hard for the family unit. I think I was selfish in a lot of ways not to recognize how that affected his siblings. They were so important too. And they had feelings and experience with Regis and his turmoil, and so there's
There's layers.
Yeah.
I don't know how you want to address it.
A lot of those with schizophrenia don't make it
Right.
out alive. And that is a very true statement. And Regis didn't. That's a whole other area.
Yeah.
It's a jumble in my mind, and there's a lot of grief, and it's hard to talk about it, but I'm glad to be able to talk about it. In suicide articles and bits that I've seen on YouTube where family and friends of the ones who have taken their life, there's a common sentiment that the person was selfish, and how dare they. That's their experience, and they're validated in their feelings. But my feeling is they're aware that they're loved, and yet they had to do it anyway. People who take their life are weak, and a lot of them are the strongest people that you could ever meet, and they're battling every single minute of the day. Sometimes they don't even get a rest.
Right, like
they've
endured so.
And they're fighting and fighting and fighting. And in a war, you lose some battles and you win some battles. And, they've been fighting these battles for so long that they just can't do it anymore. And I don't think we realize or want to think about somebody who has decided to take their life in their own hands, those last moments, those very last moments when they decide that it's happening and that's what they're going to do. And I could never look at that as a selfish act.
No.
Because a lot of people who say, they should have stayed here, they have a new niece that they were going to meet. They have, family who was counting on them. They just had a new job they were about to start. How could they be so selfish? But I feel like, how could you be so selfish?
I was just going to say that.
How could you be so selfish when to keep somebody here or be angry at them that they chose to leave when they were living in hell? Their quality of life was nothing. It wasn't weakness why they left. It was hopelessness. So you can know you're loved, and you can know that your life maybe eventually, maybe kind of, sort of, would be better and be okay, sort of, to be in that space and to finally be in the last moments of that decision. There's no hope.
I mean, when you're talking about schizophrenia, you're talking about somebody that, depending on the stage it's at, has a complete disconnection from reality.
Right.
Even if they had a new niece, or they, were gonna watch somebody graduate college or get married, in their head, it's not the way that we see it.
Right.
Those events are, that could play right into their plot that's in their mind, their version of reality.
Yeah.
So it's not like,
And we can't ignore this person, not support this person, let them flail out there on their own, and then be mad when they finally are gone.
Yeah.
That they didn't go to that graduation. Hang in there.
Right.
Till that event. That's selfish.
Yes. That is a perfect way to put it, honestly.
That's selfish. Because I feel if, they dived into any kind of support, that there would have been a feeling that that wasn't selfish at all. A tragedy, yes. Terribly sad, yes. A waste of a beautiful soul, yes. But selfish? People who take their lives are living a sadness that we don't even know.
One thing I really wanted to touch on with you was, the idea of like, who is it that we're grieving? There was Regis before schizophrenia, before the illness. There's Regis during, and then there's Regis like leading up to that moment. And they're all different people.
Yes.
And it's very hard to grasp the concept of grief when you don't. It's so hard to recognize the person you're grieving, because the person that Regis was at the end was not Regis.
Yeah.
And that's super difficult.
Yes.
It's like you go through grieving almost multiple people in a way.
Yes. I grieve every single one of them. At the end, it was more primal version of him, a survival primal. It's hard to explain.
Like every single day that he got through it was like
a miracle.
One more day.
But then quality of life was so low.
Yeah.
It was so bleak. Towards the end, it's hard to say, but part of his acting out, I was assaulted a few times. I was screamed at, in my ear, screamed at in my face, spit on. Threatened. Had things thrown at me. Well, the last time that we interacted was a huge assault and fight. I knew he was so hurt, so damaged, so broken in his mind that all I could feel was terrible desperation and heartache. That was still my son. That's still my son. And it was so painful. I grieved the loss of every single year of his life, every single stage of him, every becoming of him. He is just a beautiful, beautiful person that got caught up in his mental illness. I grieve the artist in him. I grieve his beautiful mind. I grieve his creativity. He always loved and supported me. Yes, at the end, that's what it had come down to. He always loved and cared for me, always rooted for me, and wanted the best for me. I deeply, deeply feel the loss of him, and I'm so sorry that the world didn't get to see him how we do. You feel angry sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the help? Where was the support? Where was the reach out on the other end? People. Where was the medication, the counseling? It's so hard to grapple with.
It's so
how it came to a close.
Yeah, because there's also the future that you're grieving in a way too.
Yes.
The chance of things getting better. The chance of like one day waking up and it's all over, and he's just Regis again.
Yes.
It's like you always have that hope.
Yes.
And to have that taken away too in so many ways is like.
And the loss of his future.
Yeah.
He wanted to get married. He wanted to, you were his partner for a long time. I'm sure you know better. From the mom's standpoint, he would want to be a dad. He wanted to get married. He wanted to have that life. He spoke of the future. He spoke of plans.
Yeah.
He spoke of, how he saw it all. And it was lost.
It's very hard for me because a huge reason why, I couldn't be with him anymore is because of how mentally ill he was, how hopeless I felt. It was causing a lot of aggression, stress, tension, fights, anger, resentment. And it got to a point where, I didn't feel safe. That's a really hard thing because I did see a future with him.
I know you did.
I always did.
I know you did.
I always did. And the day that he died was the first time since meeting him that I was like, that's
finished.
Yeah.
Done.
And it was very strange because even through our breakup and still staying friends with him and having other relationships, there was always that like piece of me that was like, but it's not Regis.
Right.
That's been so hard because I look to the future and I know just in my core that he felt the same way.
Oh, yes.
And there's a reality that exists somewhere, that could have been what it was. So I think for both of us, that was and is a loss that I will never make peace with. And I'm okay with not having peace with it because it's not a peaceful thing.
It's kind of acknowledgement of that fact.
Yeah. Like that was my best friend. That was the person I grew up with. That was the person that we showed each other the world. Everything about both of us, we built upon each other. Music, interests, even the way we spoke, like all sorts of things. We met when I was 14.
I know.
So it's really hard to think about like the finitude of what happened. Like even when he was sick and still here, there's always that voice in my head, like, but it could work
always
out.
Kind of that tug, always kind of that.
Yeah.
He's still out there.
Yeah, but now it's like.
No, he's not.
Yeah, and that's so.
It's too bad.
I don't even know if there's like a word for it, that feeling. It's like beyond grief. It's just.
And beyond loss. And that I loved you guys together. To me, you guys, and I would tell you that you were beautiful. You were making your way together. You were growing up together, and you complimented each other. And I just always had you guys as a given.
Right.
And I was so thankful, and I loved that given, that you guys were together, and you guys had even told me, and you were living it, that was it. It was you guys from then on. And I believed it, and I know you guys knew that and believed that. We weren't as in each other's lives at the time that you and Regis started to crumble. And so I didn't understand. I didn't know what had happened.
Right.
Because it was always that given that you guys were together and that you were good. And so I didn't really ever understand what happened. And I felt, I didn't need to, that was you guys' business, and that is the way it goes.
Like
and,
if he wanted to tell you, he
right.
would tell you.
And then
he
couldn't even tell me.
I couldn't
because
even tell
he
you.
had already started. Yeah.
Like,
it was kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
But he was entering, different stages of, schizophrenia now.
Yeah.
And then you had huge life choices to make. You had graduated, you were looking to move and go to college, and you were kind of like, so what are we doing?
Right.
And
right.
And so I know now that was, a really tough time for you guys, and that's the time when it started to become apparent that maybe Regis wasn't, as well as we thought. And
yeah, I mean, I remember him and I had hung out, and it was just like a very strange interaction. It just felt different. And I called my mom, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it was so heartbreaking. And like my whole family was like, just as you're saying, they were like, what? Like, what happened?
Yeah.
It was so strange, and I couldn't explain it, but I just knew that like something, I tried to advocate for him so much, and it became difficult, like, constantly trying to help somebody who just doesn't see what's going on. That's always been like accepting the end of that. It's always been so hard. Even when we first broke up, I every day was like, there's no way that was the right decision. There's no way.
Well, it's probably like cutting off your arm.
Yeah.
Because you guys were totally a part of each other.
Yeah.
Now
So bizarre.
you're your own self and independent, and when you're come together now in your new relationship, you're each individual and whole.
Yeah.
You made the right decision. I know when we got back together in each other's life after Regis died, you had some heavy feelings of maybe I shouldn't have left.
Yeah.
Maybe I should have hung in there. Maybe I, should have been more of a supportive partner or whatever.
Yeah.
And I know then and now you made the absolutely correct decision. And that must have been very heavy and hurt a lot. But you did the absolute right thing. You did.
Yeah,
you did. Because it would have been another life, potential future that was thwarted.
It's one of those things. It's one of the realities of the whole situation. What advice or message would you want to give to somebody who is dealing with grief and suicide loss, maybe specifically like schizophrenia loss? It's a huge question.
Yeah, it really is. All I have is my experience. You never really get to talk about that or show that or have that be a part of any kind of conversation or interaction. There's a few things. When the investigator came and told me that Regis had killed himself that day, I just buckled and yelled and had so much pain and was screaming and crying. And I wish as a society and a culture that I was allowed to do that and not be hushed and not be shushed. I would want, any mother who gets that news of her child, you lean into that. You cry, you scream, you lost your child, you deserve that. And I hated that didn't get to be part of my experience.
Yeah.
It had to get sucked in and quieted right from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cruel to do that to a parent. We shouldn't do that.
In that moment, that version of you died too.
Yeah.
That was a new journey you were about to begin in a whole journey that just ended.
Right.
That's such a specific and unique experience to have your entire reality as you knew it completely come to a halt and have to redirect, and then to be silenced
and then to
in that
be
process.
Told, stop it. Shh, shh, shh.
Yeah. Like, you're fine. Everything's going to be fine. You're fine.
Yes.
You're not fine. And that's okay.
My world ended.
That version of you, gone.
My world was ended.
Gone.
And then the grief. Everybody grieves their own way. Well, my grief style was avoidance. I knew what happened, and I knew what was going on, but I was like comforting others, and I was like happy, and I was like posting things on Facebook.
The functioning griever.
Yeah, I was just like, and I look back and I'm like, I was off the hook. Why didn't anybody rein me in? And I shouldn't put that on anybody. That's not up to anybody.
No, I get it.
But that's what I did in the beginning. I think it was like probably about 3 or 4 months of that. Just, I'm doing good, oh yeah, it all worked out, and, I was like insane.
Yeah, like
I was like
you're almost
manic.
trying to convince yourself
that
you're
like,
fine.
Yeah, and then I was going along with what I was being told. Oh, he's at peace, he's better now, aren't you glad it's over, and then, and I heard a lot of really callous and ignorant, things too. And so for me to be above it and just, happy and everything, I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't having to, take it on. And I knew the grief was coming. And I didn't want to face it. I didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because I was afraid once that grief comes in,
you're done.
I'm done.
Yeah.
it'll be over. I'll never stop crying.
Yeah.
I'll never stop hurting. I'll never be able to function again. The second stage of it all, when it did start creeping in, I had to decide myself if I was going to stay here or not. If I was going to follow Regis, if I was going to leave this earth, which I had found to be just so cruel and just so, in that time, meaningless, pointless, mean. I decided to go ahead and stay. And for me to stay, this is a lot of inner work. Meanwhile, everybody's worried, is she eating? She hasn't come out of the apartment for 3 days. Is she all right? And, and caring and meaning well. But you just want a cocoon so bad. You just don't want any outer, and yes, you're in pain, and yes, you're not doing well, but you want to be with that.
Yeah.
And so I decided to stay, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to be able to, function in this world with this grief that I'll always be carrying, and I'm going to have to be, the best me. And being part of the best me was finally healing from my wounds and my life traumas.
Yeah.
So I could, face this new life and this new world without my son, having experienced all those things with him and a lot of the pain and trauma in my own life prior. And so I'm on better footing. I'm getting healthier. And I just figured, all right, if I'm going to stay, I'm going to do the best I can do. I'm going to be the best me I can be.
It was a very heavy time.
And transformative.
Yeah.
And I kind of had to let that happen. I guess I would tell others, let this,
Yep.
Own it, feel it.
Don't run.
No.
Don't run.
No.
It's no use.
Oh my gosh.
You cannot run around it. You have to run right through it.
Right.
You have to.
And you were a huge support during those darkest days throughout this whole past year. From the beginning, and there's like a season of each one that we went through independently of each other. You reached out to me and you'd say, make a cup of tea, when I couldn't even get out of bed or comb my hair. And I was too nervous to go get the mail. You're like, go make some tea. And I could do that.
Right.
And even if it was that one thing I could do that day, you encouraged me. You helped prompt me and give me little ideas that I could do and feel accomplished before I went back to that bed, before I went back to that comforter on the couch. You did that many times over the past year and a half. You were so strong and helpful and supportive of me. Meanwhile, you were hurting so much too.
I could say the same for you. If it wasn't for our reconnection and just the conversations, like the very honest conversations we had, like I don't know where I would be. I really don't.
There just wasn't any other way to be anymore.
No. And like, yeah, the reality sucks. Like, we're not denying that.
No.
But at the end of the day, whether you run and hide or you deal with it, it sucks.
Yeah.
And it either sucks for way longer or you get to try to find a way to at least make peace with your day-to-day life.
Yes.
You don't need to make peace with what happened. You don't need to heal from it. You don't need to be cured of it. The grief is there. It's not going anywhere.
And it always will be.
I have spent the last year relearning who I am. Like
What a year,
there's a new version of me.
Year. Mm-hmm,
it's like,
too.
who is this person? It's
Me
almost
too.
like you're rediscovering your own existence in many ways.
Yes.
And that is so hard, so challenging, but so rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate that it had to come from such a horrible thing. But I'd much rather be where I am today than if I had chosen the path of hiding from it. Because I would still be just as bad. Imagine you're where you were a year ago still.
Thank heavens for the growth that came from it, the change, the insight, because now we're so much better.
Yeah, and I had a very similar thought of something you said earlier, like, if I'm going to be here, I can't stay this way.
Right.
I need to become better. that's a very difficult thing to say. And I think it just reached a point where it was like, I'm either dead or I have to find a reason. And there was no other reason. I didn't care about, friends, family. I didn't care about graduating college.
Yeah,
I didn't care about
go-tos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was nothing inspiring me other than, I guess we'll see what kind of person I can become in the next, 6 months. As much as it's cliche advice, I think things are cliche for a reason. To take it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. There were moments for me, and this is going to be dark, but like there were moments for me where it was like, I don't know if I see myself being here 10 minutes from now. And it was like, okay, but I'm here right now, and I'm just going to wait for another minute. And eventually that minute turns into an hour and then turns into a day, and you just keep convincing yourself like one more minute.
And now that it's been a year, it's like, oh my gosh.
It's like,
Wow.
whoa.
But living that year, yeah, like 10.
And the amount
Like
of things
50.
that happened, like I graduated college. I don't even know how I finished college. To be quite honest with you,
I don't know either.
you were there.
Yeah.
You were there
You're
for
just
the
kind of
end.
like, I have 10 reports. I have a project.
I was insane. Like I don't know how I did it. I don't. But it's weird. Like Regis.
Autopilot, maybe?
It had to be, because after college, things crashed very quickly. And thank goodness I moved back home. The existential anxiety that came after you lose someone to suicide, it's different. It almost makes you feel as if suicide can happen to you too. And suicide doesn't happen to you. It's something that you choose. But it felt as if the timer was on.
Yeah.
And I was fighting every day to not kill myself. And that was...
Isn't that something?
bizarre.
It's kind of like this hole that's left open a little bit.
Yeah.
And that if we're not careful with our mind, our thoughts, our decisions, that we could like get
You
sucked
might
right
venture.
into that hole.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying about the time was on. And I'm glad when that window was closed.
Yeah, me too.
Because there is a window.
Yeah.
There definitely is.
And you just have to find an outlet, whether it's painting, drawing, talking to a friend. You need to find something, because it cannot sit inside of you. It will come back. It will come back with a vengeance.
Comes back all the time.
But especially if you don't deal with it.
Even when you are dealing with it and
Yeah.
trying to work with it to heal and be able to handle those waves, it comes back. You got to make that decision which way it's going to come back. Is it going to engulf you? Is it going to drown you? Is it going to leave you worse for wear? I feel so good about our conversation. It went really well.
Me too.
And I just love that you're doing this. I'm just so thankful you invited me, and I had a really great time.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you did this with me. This was really important. If I was going to do this podcast, this needed to be an episode. I'm just glad that we can actually talk about it, and that we're not running from it, and that we can sit down and
I love that too.
Explore this and help other people, because if this had to happen to Regis, why would we sit back and not try to help other people with his story?
Yeah, let's not have this go by the wayside and be forgotten.
Right.
That would be another tragedy.
Yeah, one of my best friends, he told me, and I think I've told you this before, but when somebody dies, they can die twice. The first time is when they actually die, and the second time is when we stop talking about them. And that second death does not have to happen. For anybody listening to this, anybody watching, if you're dealing with the loss of a loved one or grief, you don't have to bury it. You can talk about your person. You can share their life, their experiences, their struggles, their best moments, their worst moments, because the worst thing we can do for people who we've lost is act as if we can move on from them.
Yeah.
Because we can't.
Nope.
So thank you so much again for coming on. This was so great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode of And Also. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and give this a thumbs up for the video version. And of course, listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Download it, follow the podcast, and save it to your playlist. Send it to someone who may want to dive into some of these bigger topics. And thank you so much again for listening. And I will see you next week for another episode. Bye, guys.